watched the video from yesterday. And so you got a little bit about affirmative action and welfare. Okay. I didn't really finish the welfare one. There's really 6 forms of welfare, like major forms. I talked about Medicaid. I didn't talk about housing. I don't know if you've heard of what's called Section 8 housing. This is like subsidized housing. Remember when you studied the New Deal last semester and they talked about building projects? I don't know if you covered that, talked about the projects. Okay, so this is low-income housing. If I looked this up yesterday, if you spend more than 30% of your income on rent, okay, then you can qualify for subsidies or, government help with your rent. The thing there is that there's not enough Section 8 housing, say, in Wichita. So, like, if a house comes open or an apartment comes open, there's a long line of people that are trying to get into it, okay? So, I mean, just this question is really based on kind of your worldview. Obviously, as Catholics, as Christians, believe that, we need to take care of our poor. The conservative point of view would be more of like, so before the New Deal and before the federal government started getting involved and government started getting involved in welfare, or what they used to call dole, where would people go to get help if they needed help? Generally, it would be their families, their neighbors, or their church. Okay, and a lot of the churches were set up the charities to help people and so forth. Okay, and I don't know if you guys know this about the Wichita diocese. Okay, but over 80% of all the money that the diocese takes in goes towards education, towards the schools. Okay, so that kind of limits the ability of your church and my church to provide a lot for those out there that need help. Okay, I don't know if I got into this a little bit. Tell me if you heard this yesterday. So, like in the 1967 and 80s, like if you had a child out of wedlock, they send you a check. If you had another child, you just get, and things just got out of control. But the law in '95, where they changed it and said, well, in Kansas, for instance, you have to be working or going to school in order to qualify for welfare. Some states have done away with that, okay, with the work requirement. It's kind of a general feeling. Do you think that it's too easy to get welfare? Is there too much out there, or is there not enough? I mean, if you're feeling the burn, some of you might know what that means, like Bernie Sanders. Some people want more, like free college, free healthcare, that sort of thing. So that'll be kind of your view of how you see welfare as it is today. Is it too easy? Are people abusing it? Should we reduce it or make it more difficult? Or should we expand it? So if you think we're good where we're at, you should say no. If you think we should expand welfare, you would say no. If you think we should reduce it some, make it a little bit more difficult, say yes. Does that make sense? Okay. And then we're going to move on to the next one. Allow prayer in school. Okay. Now, obviously, if you are a parent, as many of you will be one day, you will make a decision about where you're going to send your kids to school. Okay. My wife and I both went to public schools. That was back, in the 70s and 80s. I graduated from high school in 1986. There were private schools where I went to high school, but it's not something I don't think my parents ever considered. Okay. When my wife and I had our son, society has changed a lot since the 1980s. So we thought we would send our kids to private school, to religious school, okay, like you guys, okay, so that you would get the fundamentals of Christianity, kind of have the difference of right and wrong driven into you, about salvation and so forth. So you guys will make that decision. I imagine some of your parents attended Bishop Carroll High School. Okay, so they enjoyed it, thought it was a good education, and so forth. So obviously you can send your kid to a religious school if you want prayer in school. Now, in this country, if we go back in history, okay, the first public schools in this country were basically set up in towns where, the people would pool together money to hire a teacher, they'd build a school, and you'd send your kids there, okay? And a lot of times you had one-room schoolhouses, right, where you had, first graders in there with 12th graders and so forth, and one teacher for all those kids, all right? But the first textbook used in the United States in public schools, do you guys know what that was? The Bible. Okay, and now we do have something called the First Amendment to the Constitution. Okay, so the Bill of Rights was passed in 1791. Okay, and you guys know, you've heard this, the First Amendment talks about freedom of religion, yes? Okay, so to be more exact, there's two clauses in the First Amendment talking about religion. There's the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Okay, so what it says that Congress shall pass no law establishing a religion, nor prohibit the free exercise thereof. So the reason they put that in there, guys, this Establishment Clause, is because when we broke away from Britain, okay, those 13 colonies became 13 countries until they wrote a constitution that united them into one country. You follow me? And each of those 13 countries or states wrote their own state constitutions. And in those state constitutions, guys, they had official state religions, many of them did. So you could not run for governor of a certain state if you were not an Episcopalian. There was a religious test to hold office. And when they wrote the Constitution in the Bill of Rights, they said, we're not going to have that. We're not going to have the Church of the United States of America like the Church of England. You know what I mean? We're not doing that. We're going to have freedom of religion. So Congress cannot establish a religion nor prohibit your free exercise. So can a student over at Northwest High School right now, in first out, I don't know if they're there yet, but they will be next week or the following week, can they pray in class? Absolutely. Now, can they pray out loud and disturb the class? No. Okay. They can play. You can pray anytime you want, anywhere you want, right? That's the free exercise of religion. Doesn't matter what religion it is. Okay. So we have some, interesting religions out there. Yes. Because, really, would you guys think about this? Would you want to live in a country that was ran by Catholic priests under, say, Old Testament law? Would you want to live in that country? I wouldn't. Okay. So we don't have an official religion. Okay. So, but for 150 years, schools prayed. Okay. You had prayer in school. You had an intercom come on at the beginning of the day and you had prayer. Okay. Until 1961. Supreme Court case. Engel versus Vital. Okay. In this case, there were some parents and some students that complained that the prayer over the intercom was at the public school, which is a government school paid for with tax dollars, was forcing their kids to recite a prayer that they didn't believe in. And so this was really the first time that school prayer was struck down. Okay. And since then, there's been a lot of Supreme Court cases to kind of figure out where the borderline is, what you can do and what you can't do. Okay, have any of you guys ever watched the movies God is Not Dead, God is Not Dead 2? Okay, God is Dead, God is Not Dead 2. There's a student. It's an interesting scenario where you have an atheist family, and the daughter is curious. She sees, I think, the teacher wearing a cross. And so she begins to ask the teacher questions. Okay. Now, in the classroom, the teacher can't really, proselytize or evangelize. You know what I mean? She's not allowed to do that. Okay. But outside of school, they met for lunch or something, and she began answering questions about Christianity and about Jesus and stuff like that. And boy, she got, the parents found out, and they went after the school. Okay. This sort of thing is kind of interesting. You have situations where, what about before a football game? Okay, on a Friday night at a public school, can the team say a prayer? Absolutely. Okay. Can the coach lead that prayer? No. Can the coach force the kids to pray? No. Okay. When I first started teaching here, my first year, they ask you to coach something. You're like, yeah, I'll coach it. Okay. So I coached football my freshman, and I coached freshman football. Okay. I never played football. I never once put on a helmet. Okay. And so I had no idea what I was doing. I watched a lot of football. So I was the defensive coordinator and the offensive line coach. We won one game. Okay. But I got to coach with Coach Lawbon, which was an awesome treat. And I was also the Scholars Bowl coach. Okay. And we won city that year. Okay. So I was coaching 3 sports. All right. We went out to Liberal for a football game. Okay, I traveled with the varsity, went out to Liberal for a football game, and over the intercom at the stadium on the school grounds, they said the Lord's Prayer before the game. And I was like, you got to be kidding. I can't believe they did that. Now, I didn't have a problem with it, but I was shocked. Okay, if you tried that at Northwest High School or in the city of Wichita, you'd have outraged people all over the place. But apparently nobody in Liberal at that point had complained because they will get sued if people find out. There are organizations that look for violations of this and go after schools, city governments, state governments, and all sort of things. Okay? But guys, since 1961, we've really slowly started to take God out of the public square. Okay? And if you look at our society since the 1960s, you have fewer and fewer Americans that believe in God. So if you ask people back in 1970, how many Americans, what percentage of Americans believe in God? It was over 90%. Okay, in 2020, you ask that question, you're going to be lucky if you get 60%. Now, here's the thing, guys. When people don't know the difference between right and wrong, and we talked about welfare. We talked about the number of single-parent families in this country. Okay? Guys, I've been a single parent in a sense. I have a wife that travels a lot for work. Okay? And so there were times when she was doing turnarounds at a plant in Fort Dodge, Iowa, where she was gone for 3 weeks, a month, maybe would come back for a day or two. Every 10 days, she'd come home for a day or two. What's going on here? The internet's acting up. Hopefully we're okay. And so I have 2 young kids at home working full time. It's hard to be a single parent. Okay, so I work all day, go home, make sure the kids are fed, make sure they do their homework, do the bath, and then go to bed, get up, do it all over again. Take them to school. It's tough. Okay, there's not a lot of time to focus on other things. And so you have a lot of single parent kids growing up in single parent households. And then they go to public school and they don't get taught the difference between right and wrong. Let me just give you an example. I can tell you this right now. This is what I can say to you. Premarital sex is wrong. It's a sin. It's against God's law. It's something that should wait for marriage. Okay? Now, I've got one of my best friends in the world that teaches same classes I teach, government at Northwest High School. Okay? He used to teach here. He's a good Irish Catholic. Tom O'Connor. I don't know if any of you guys know the O'Connors. You know the O'Connors. Tom can say to his students, here are the consequences for premarital sex. The chances of you getting pregnant and then having a child out of wedlock, and the chances of your child growing up to be successful are going to be diminished. The chances of you growing up and being successful are going to be diminished. You can get venereal disease, right? You get VD. You catch these different things. These are the consequences of premarital sex. But he can't tell you it's wrong. Because if he tells you it's wrong, and somebody asks, Mr. O'Connor, why is it wrong? How does he answer that question? He can't. Because God says it's wrong. He can't say that. So the students don't learn the truth. Do you understand? And so we have a whole, generations and generations of young people growing up, many living in poverty, that don't know the difference between right and wrong. So there are advocates out there that say we should bring God back into the schools. Now, how do you do that without violating the Establishment Clause? You could do a prayer or a moment of silence or something like that at the beginning. I'll tell you what Kentucky's doing. Kentucky has allowed for elective classes, elective religion classes, where if students want to learn about Christianity, they can, or other religions. Okay? I understand the argument that if you have a Muslim student in a public school and they do a Christian prayer, I can understand the argument of the parent there. You know what I mean? Or if you have a Muslim teacher, okay, and they want to do a Muslim prayer at the public school and you're a Christian, I can understand a parent not liking that, okay? So how do we work this out? How do we bring prayer? How do we bring God back into our public square, back into our lives? Now, I'll just give you a little background on me. And I don't know if I told this class yet or not. I assume everybody here in this classroom is Catholic. I'm not. Okay. I don't know if you guys knew that about me. Haley probably did. I'm a heathen. I'm a Protestant. Okay. You guys can give me a hard time on that. Okay. Have I told you this yet? Okay. So, but I've been teaching at Bishop Carroll it's my 23rd year. Okay. So based on the number of masses that I've been in 23 years, I may have been to more masses than you in your life, because you're 17 and 18. Okay. Maybe not, because of summer. Okay. But I'm kind of like an adopted Catholic, all right? I feel really comfortable here. You know what I mean? My first year was it was awkward, okay? But it's not awkward anymore. And I've had many students try and convert me. Okay, and faculty members and priests, okay, over the years. So it's okay. There's just a few little differences, But anyhow, I was not raised in the church. So when I was a baby, I was baptized in the Presbyterian church. And when I was 3, my dad said, we're not going to church anymore. So I never went to Sunday school. I never went to church. And then thankfully I met a girl in college, okay, and she was Presbyterian. And so I started going to church with this girl, okay, and we dated for about a year, and then we broke up, went to different colleges, and I kept going to church, okay, and so that was mine. And I got in some trouble when I was in school. You know what I mean? Like, I did some dumb things, and I think teachers can have such a positive influence on kids. So if a teacher kind of was able to maybe take me aside, you know, if somebody's going down the wrong path and could teach them about Jesus and the redeeming, you know, nature of Jesus and following, you know, this life, okay? Because I swear to you guys, okay, one of the things I can bring for you that, and I'm not your parent, and I'm not your priest, one of the things I can tell you, but this is the way to live. This is the way to raise children, is through the church, okay? There's so much happiness and so much joy with that, okay? And I'm so glad that I, you know, came to Christ, you know what I mean? That this happened for me and that I've raised my kids this way. I can't see any other way of doing it. I can't see being an atheist and not believing in God. There's so much that can change people's lives going the wrong direction. And teachers are not allowed to discuss that with their students. Okay, and I think that is a detriment to our society. But how do we do this without violating the Constitution? Okay, if you think there's a way, you think we should try, then you want to say yes. Let's bring prayer or bring God back into the schools. At least open the door for people. Okay, or you know, we've gotten to a point where we're so diverse. I mean, we have a lot of Muslims in this country. We have a lot of Hindus. We have Buddhists. We have Jews. We've got Catholics. We've got Christians. We've got, you know, atheists. How do we do that without upsetting the different groups? Okay. So you decide. Cool? All right. Number 5, try 14-year-olds as adults. Now, guys, before you answer this is for violent crime. This is not for shoplifting, okay? This is not, you know, for, you know, getting in a fight with another kid, another 14-year-old. What is that, 8th grade? 14-year-olds? I got in a fight in the 8th grade. This redheaded kid. Neither one of us hit the other guy in the face. I mean, we were just slugging each other, you know, in the lunchroom. It was stupid. But anyhow, this is for violent crime. This is for rape. This is for murder. This is for, yeah, really, those really murder and rape. Those seriously violent crimes, okay? So let me just give you a scenario. Well, let me tell you what the law says. We do try 14-year-olds as adults. I've heard people as young as 10 being charged as adults. This is what a judge is going to want to know. Does the perpetrator understand the consequences of their actions? Okay? Now, you guys are not too far removed from 14, okay? Any of you guys have 14-year-old siblings or close, you know what I mean? Okay. Do 14-year-olds, most of them know the difference between right and wrong? Yes. Okay? So let me give you the scenario. You guys have heard of the video game Grand Theft Auto? Right. It's a very violent, criminal behavior video game, okay? So you got this 14-year-old that spends, you know, 5-6 hours a day playing Grand Theft Auto. And then Grand Theft Auto 2 comes out, you know, the next version. How much is that game going to cost? It's going to cost you $60, okay, to get the next one, right? So the kid doesn't have any money, but he's learned his behaviors, okay, from Grand Theft Auto. So he gets a baseball bat, and he goes and hides by an ATM machine and waits for this little old lady to come by to get money out of the ATM. And he bashes her over the head. Okay, she falls down, hits the curb, dies. This 14-year-old just killed this grandmother. Okay, now, let's say it's your grandmother. All right, now this kid's in trouble. Okay, if we go through the juvenile system, the child, the 14-year-old, will be charged as a juvenile. They will go to juvenile hall till the age of 18. Okay, and then they will be released. Okay, if you charge them as an adult, you'll send them to juvenile hall till the age of 18, and then they will be transferred to an adult facility. We don't send 14-year-olds to adult prisons, okay? So you've got two sides of this, okay? Can we rehab, reform this 14-year-old so when they're 18, they get out and they won't do it again? Now, when you throw a 14-year-old into juvenile hall, you're throwing that 14-year-old into a place with a bunch of other kids that have committed crimes. Okay? We do not do a good job in this country of reforming our inmates. Okay? That's another thing. It's like Christian missions in prison ministry. Okay? That's an important ministry of trying to change people's lives that are in prison. But anyhow, we have what are called very high recidivism rates in this country. So once you commit a crime, the likelihood of committing that crime again is very high, that you're going to go back to jail once you've been to jail. Okay, do some people get that one chance and then they like straighten themselves out? Absolutely. Okay. We're very forgiving in this country of first-time offenders. If you're a first-time offender in this country, they tend not to treat you too harshly. Okay, well, when it comes to murder, it's a little different. Okay, but so can we reform these people, or a violent person like this that's willing to take a baseball bat to somebody's head, to an old lady? Do you want them to do adult time? Okay, so we would classify that crime as second-degree murder. He didn't mean to kill her. He just meant to knock her down so he could steal her money. First-degree murder is planned, premeditated. I'm going to kill this person, and then you go do it. Okay, and that's the one you can get the death penalty for, depending on what state you live in. Okay, that's capital murder. First-degree murder. Okay. So this 14-year-old could likely go to juvie for 4 years, and then maybe 20 to 40 additional. Okay, for second-degree murder. Maybe get a manslaughter. Okay, so 18, and then maybe another 10 years in adult prison. Are you hey, lock them up, these violent criminals, lock them up, keep them off the streets, or are you, hey, let's give this kid another chance? But if you give this kid another chance, who's the next victim? The older you are, the less violent you generally are. Okay? I don't want to get in a fight right now. Okay? Because it would hurt my body too much. The actual fight itself. Not worried about getting hurt, but just hurting myself in the process. Okay, like pickleball. I played pickleball twice in 3 days last week, and my knee is swollen. Okay, if I got in a fight, I'm going to be like, things are going to hurt. I don't want to hurt. Okay, I don't recover fast. You know what I mean? So the older you are, the less violent you are. So if you put somebody away for a while, then they get out. I don't know how you feel about this, okay? But the law says they just need to understand the consequences of their actions, and they can be tried as an adult, okay? And again, this is just for violent crime. All right? This is your worldview, how you think about things, okay? You decide. Okay, limit the number of gun control laws. All right, now this is worded funny, so be careful. All right. Gun control laws. Now, I'm going to recite for you the Second Amendment to the Constitution. All right, the First Amendment has freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to peacefully assemble and petition your government. Okay, it's got 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. And then the founder said, well, in the Second Amendment, This is what they said. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay, well, back in the day, guys, when we broke away from Britain, every state except for Pennsylvania if you were a male, you had to join the militia. You didn't have a choice. Now, the militia would meet, once a month on a weekend, and they would learn how to shoot their guns and march, and they'd learn some military tactics. That's what the militia did. And when the time for the revolution came around, Washington had a continental army that was filled with people that were former militiamen, and then they had the militia that would help Washington's continental army. You follow me? We don't defeat Britain without the militia. We don't defeat the Native Americans that may attack your town without the militia. Okay, starting back in 1607. Okay, so the militia is something that we've had around. Now, some people would say today the militia is the Kansas National Guard. Those are citizen soldiers, and they are armed. Some would say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, means you and I. Now, have you guys ever heard of Wyatt Earp? Wyatt Earp? Okay. You live in Kansas, right? Okay. Wyatt Earp was a lawman. You've heard of the Wild West. Dodge City, Kansas. Okay? Violence. Dodge City, Kansas. It was the Wild West. And people were shooting each other and gunfights. And you've ever seen a Western? Guys, back in the 60s, 70s, they are tons of Western movies. Okay? You get a few now. Okay? But anyhow, Dodge City hired Wyatt Earp to be the sheriff to clean up that town. And he put a sign up, the city limits, that said all guns will be turned over to the sheriff upon entering Dodge City. You get them back when you leave. Okay? Did that infringe on your right to keep and bear arms? That gun law? In a sense, it did. But it was for safety purposes. There's a sign when you walk into the building, on the door, every door that you walk into, with a gun on it, right? With a line through it. Yes? That's a gun law. You can't bring a gun to school. Okay? There's a sign like that when you go to the shopping mall. When you go to the movie theater, okay? You cannot buy a handgun until you're 21 years old. That's a gun law. You can't buy a shotgun until you're 18 years old. That's a gun law. So if a high school student comes into a school with a gun, they're under the age of 21, yes? Did that law prevent that high school student from bringing that gun? Did either law, a handgun, he violated that law, and he violated this law of bringing it to school. So you had two laws that were broken that did not stop the school shooting. So we have tons of laws on the book, gun laws on the book. You understand? Okay. Do they stop people from committing crimes? No. Okay? There are speed limit laws that I violate every day. Okay? Now, there's a big difference between a gun law and, gun is a dangerous instrument. Okay? So anytime we have a shooting in this country, a mass shooting, there was a murder in South Wichita last night. Okay? One person dead, one person arrested. Probably used a handgun. Okay? Most crimes are committed, gun crimes are committed with handguns. Okay? They're easy to conceal, they're easy to get, okay? They're easy to use. Most crimes are not carried out with AR-15s. How many of you guys know what an AR-15 is? You know what AR stands for? It does not stand for assault rifle. Okay? Any hunters in here like to hunt deer? Okay, use a rifle. Yes? What's the difference between a hunting rifle and an AR-15? AR-15 is not automatic, semi-automatic. So what that means, you have to pull the trigger every time, yes? Now, in your hunting rifle, do you have a clip? How many bullets? 5. Is it a big clip? Little clip? Okay. So you may have 3 or 4 shots in it or something like that, okay? So with an AR-15 or your rifle, you can probably get a bigger clip to go in it. So you could have several shots. But a semi-automatic gun, guys, you have to pull the trigger each time. Okay? You follow me? Okay. A fully automatic, you pull the trigger once and it sprays bullets. Okay? Fully automatic weapons, okay, are very hard to buy in the United States of America. You can own them, but you have to have a special license to own them. You can't go buy one at the gun store. You understand? And it's illegal to refit a semi-automatic and make it automatic. Okay? Without a license. Okay, now, the Las Vegas Massacre a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember hearing about this, okay? The perpetrator of this crime had what was called a bump stock, okay? Which is something you put on the end of the gun that's on your shoulder. And when you fire, the recoil allows you to kind of pull the trigger quickly. The bump stock. They ban those in this country, okay? I don't know if I really have a problem with that, okay? That's a new gun law, okay? The question is, what laws can we pass to stop a school shooting without them violating? I mean, you can't force people to follow the law. So every time there's a shooting, people say we need more gun laws. Now, we have background checks. Some states have waiting periods. Okay? Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. Okay? I never owned a gun. I never hunted. I never owned a gun until the pandemic hit. So this summer, for the first time, I bought a gun. Why? I don't know. Break down the society, want to be able to defend my family. You know what I mean? Been to the shooting range a couple times. You know, I need to go through the class. My son went to college. That was one reason why, because I'm afraid to have a gun in the house with kids. It's always been a thing for me. But I just felt like, I don't know. You saw the riots this summer, and it's like, man, I just want to be able to defend my house, my people. You know? Should the government be able to take that right away from you? Now, in Washington, D.C., back in the early 2000s, this goes back to 2005, Washington, D.C. and Chicago, major cities with major crime, banned handguns in the city limits. You could own an AR-15, you could own a rifle, you could own a shotgun, but you could not own a handgun in the nation's capital. Okay? There was this guy named Heller, a law-abiding citizen, kind of, in his home one night in Washington, D.C., and somebody broke into his house with a gun. So the perpetrator committed 2 crimes. Heller had a handgun. He shot the intruder. They arrested Heller for owning a gun, possessing a gun in Washington, D.C. city limits. So Heller sued. This went all the way to the Supreme Court. So this is Heller versus the District of Columbia, 2005. Now, this is the first time the Supreme Court had ruled on gun ownership, gun rights, since the 1920s. And the Supreme Court said that this law prohibiting an individual in this country from owning or possessing a gun is unconstitutional. Okay, so Heller was let off. Okay, and it told cities like Chicago, you can't prohibit people from owning a gun unless there are some limits. If you are a convicted felon, it is illegal for you to own a gun. That's a pretty good law. Okay, but let's say if you were convicted of, say, money laundering, which had nothing to do with violence or anything like that, you lose your right to own a gun and defend yourself or your family. Maybe that's not a good law. Some people want to pass a law, if you're ever charged with domestic violence, because most crimes, guys, are not random. So if you ever got in a fight with your husband or your wife and it became physical, some people want to have a law that says you can't own a gun any longer. Okay? Which could be interesting because let's say you're 18 years old and you and your girlfriend are at the mall and this really pretty girl walks by and you're like checking her out and your girlfriend's like, what are you doing? You know, that jealous type. Now, and she like starts pushing it and hitting it. And he's like, pushes her back, get off me. Somebody sees that, calls the cops, domestic violence. Somebody's going down to the station. You may lose your right to ever own a gun again. So the way this is worded, guys, let me keep talking. The rule here at the school, and while I'm talking about, let's just get this on. Okay. If there's an active shooter situation here, I know your teacher probably talked to you about this before, but you're in a different classroom right now. Okay. If there's an active shooter, they're going to try and give us as much information over the intercom as they can. Where this person is, what's going on. Okay. The best thing to do is to get out of the building as fast as you can. Okay. This is a good room for that. Okay. If there's a shooter in the 100 hallway, you can go through this door right here, not that one, this door. It goes to Lovelace's room. You can go out her room and out the AC. Okay? If there's a shooter in the 400 hallway, you can go out this door, take a right, and this is where we do the fire drill. You go down those stairs, not these stairs, those stairs right over there. You guys know what I'm talking about? And that doesn't even lead back into the hallway downstairs. That'll take you right out the front of the school. That's the quickest way out of the building. And don't walk, run. Get out. Okay? So we can go. We're going to get out. We're not going to barricade in here. Unless there's multiple, like one, you know. You're like, all right, then we, you know, shut the door and we fight. I'll get desk right there and I'm going to, you know, boom. You know, you guys can back me up. All right. So those laws, guys, when we see mass shootings in this country, most of those times they are in gun-free zones. Because the perpetrator knows nobody else in this place has a gun to stop me. Some people want teachers to be armed. Some people want a police officer or somebody like that in the school. Would any of you have a problem with Mr. Lemunion having a gun? Locked in a safe in his office? I trust Mr. Lemunion. His family's law enforcement, his dad, his son, he's a hunter. You know, I trust that guy. You know, I wouldn't have a problem with that. It would be illegal for him to do that. Okay. So listen, the way this is worded, be careful, okay? This says limit the number of gun control laws. So if you think we have enough laws on the book, then say yes. If you think we need more laws, okay, and guys, this is still the Wild West. Do you understand? Like I said, there was a murder in South Wichita last night. We had 57 last year in Wichita. Homicides. This is still the Wild West. You go to cities like Chicago over a weekend, they're fortunate. They have less than 50 shootings in a weekend. It's a tough issue. So if you want more laws, say no. If you want stricter gun laws, say no. Okay? Good? Have a great day, guys.